So this year, Fujikura launched an update on the Ventus range of hybrids. Now this incorporates the VeloCore Plus material, so it's an update on the original VeloCore, so essentially improving feel, but ultimately it's got extra premium bias core material, and that means less overling, it means more consistency of the club-headed impact, so straighter dispersion, and in principle better ball speed as well. But going to hit each one of the new models, the red, the blue and the black, in the same head, the same settings, and look at what performance characteristics you can expect to see from each one and why you might choose one versus the other. So we're going to start by looking at the red profile. Now the red series is designed to be the highest flighting shaft. Now technically none of the VeloCore shafts, the Ventus, they're not high spin products because of the nature of the material, they're really stable. So actually the red is the softest tip profile of the Ventus range and is designed to give the most flight and the most kick from the tip, a little bit more spin and height. So you're going to hit a few shots with this and we'll go compare through the other models and then look at the data after that. So start with the red. So certainly this series is definitely a little bit, they swing a little bit less heavy than the first generation. It definitely had a bit more, from a weight point of view, a bit more guts in the bottom end of the shaft. So, feel, that was one of the things with the VeloCore Plus that's meant to have been improved and augmented. So how does that translate to hitting? So there's definitely a little bit more of an even kick through the shaft. We can definitely feel some response, decent bit of launch and flight out of that. I think the original series had a kind of harder, more solid feel to them, but by nature of the balance profile changing, it comes with me a little bit more easily. They don't feel as hard work to move. So part of that's going to help generate a bit more flight, but there's definitely that little bit of kick out the bottom of this shaft. So I feel like the shaft's giving me a little bit extra. So that's something, the VeloCore range, the red in particular, yes, highest launching, but they've definitely augmented that feedback. So you don't feel like you've got to work it as hard to get full response out of the shaft. So I can swing with a little bit of tempo and smoothness, and you can feel the shaft trying to give me a little bit more. And I think that's something that for a lot of players, the original series maybe felt like you got to work the response out of the shaft. A lot of players in hybrids, we want them to be as easy to use as possible, and some of that is that feedback from the product and feedback from the shaft. And if it feels hard, we're going to have to work hard to get the response, whereas actually this one makes me feel like I can just put a nice, smooth, quiet tempo on. Collect the ball on the way through, and the shaft's giving me a little bit extra. So certainly from the red range point of view, easier to swing from a balance point of view, definitely some nice response through that mid to lower section, but without the head feeling loose. And it still feels, I know there's a bit of a misstroke, but it still feels a very stable contact. So as I said earlier, the Ventus are never going to feel soft. They're always got that stability at impact, but definitely some kick through the bottom of this. Definitely a big improvement, I think, on first gen. Let's go to the blue. So moving into the blue series, now none of the Ventus, as we said earlier, are high spin shafts, but the blue is definitely a little more stout in the tip to the red, so you can expect it to feel a bit more solid and should bring the spin down a little bit without being a low launching shaft. So let's get into hit some, tell you how it feels. So first thing to notice is it's noticeably a little bit of a heavier pickup. And by that I mean the balance point's a little lower down the shaft. Now we have got a more stout tip section, so structurally there would be an explanation for that and the amount of kind of stability and rigidity down the bottom end, but from a feel point of view I can definitely feel the bottom end of the shaft that little bit more. So how does that translate to hitting? Certainly a little bit more of a tight feel at impact. You can definitely sense that it's a firmer tip section, whereas the red, it felt like I didn't have to work the shaft at all. It gave me that bit of kick and flight. This one I can feel it holding on a little bit tighter, so there's definitely a progression in terms of performance off that. Now interesting enough, the pickup, I can feel the bottom end a bit more than I did the red series, but actually swinging it didn't move particularly tip heavy, and by that I mean it didn't feel like the club wanted to drop underneath on me on the way down. So actually the kind of the in-hand feel versus the swing feel was slightly, it swung easier than it felt like it was going to on pickup. So whilst it's feel-wise a tight feeling shaft, it doesn't feel hard work to swing. but I can feel myself automatically wanting to get into this one a little bit more because that tip section is a bit more stout. It actually suits a little bit more of an aggressive move because you've got that little bit more stability and rigidity to hit against. It feels like it wants to be hit a little bit more, whereas the Red series felt like it wanted to do the work. I've got to work the result out of this just a little bit more from a feel point of view. You know, whilst not harsh and dead by any stretch of the imagination, it's definitely a pretty sturdy bit of kit. You know, there's a notable uplift versus the Red series, which is what you'd expect. You know, the whole design of the shaft is that, but this isn't going to be as enjoyable to hit for someone who has a quieter tempo and wants to feel the club give them some kick. You definitely want to get into this a little bit more. So potentially someone who's a little bit more on top of it, plays it slightly more iron-like, and gets into the back of the ball rather than just kind of clipping away and nipping it off the top. If you get on top and squeeze it a bit more, then this shaft probably feels a little bit more in the kind of window that you're going to enjoy. So that's the blue. Let's ramp it up to the black. So we're now into the black range, and again, this is more stable yet again than the blue. So designed for a little bit more of an aggressive hit, designed to hold on a little bit tighter. So again, you're stiffening up that mid and lower section that little bit more. Both the black and the blue have a stable tip section, but this one's a little more solid in the middle. So again, designed for a slightly heavier load, a little bit more of a dynamic, in principle, dynamic load on the shaft. So someone who's got a little bit of a sharper kind of load on it and pulls on the shaft a bit more, maybe kind of getting on top of it a bit more, hitting it more like an iron, but definitely designed just to hold on tight, hold on for grim death and kind of keep that ball flight a little bit more down and forwards in principle. So let's move into giving it a hit. Now with this one, I'm anticipating, you know, that I'm going to have to work this quite hard. If we had to work a little bit of result out the blue, then this one's up a little bit more and is going to require me to be a little bit more dynamic as well with the swing. So very similar pickup, maybe a hair of a heavier feel than the blue, but pretty darn similar. But yeah, it's one of those, because I know what the shaft's designed to do, there is a bit of anticipation about what it's going to feel like at impact, but I'll try and ignore that for the first swing. Yeah, and certainly that first one at impact got a little bit toey, but you could feel the firmness and the guts to the bottom of the shaft in that. You know, there's certainly, this shaft is not giving you anything back, which again, if you're a more aggressive swinger, if you want to feel more like an extension off the irons per se, then you've got that stiffness, that stability at the bottom end where it's really holding on. The blue still gives you a little bit more, although a lot more stout than the red, but this one, yeah, you could, for the Ventus range, they're kind of ultimate stability through impact. So yeah, you're not gonna, it's not a shaft designed for someone with that quieter tempo. It's very much designed for someone who wants to be a little bit more aggressive or is naturally a bit more aggressive with their swing. You know, then you start to feel a little bit more pop out the shaft when you start to work it a little harder. You haven't necessarily got to hit it hard, but it's going to suit someone who's got a little bit more of a dynamic move, dynamic transition, because you're putting a bit more stress on the shaft. With a sharper change of direction, you get a little bit more back from it. It's still very, very stable down the bottom end in the tip. So you know, it's certainly not going to feel like it gives out on you at all, but definitely, you know, the more aggressively I move this and the stronger I hit at it, the more the shaft's going to give me back. But it's definitely not going to feel loose. You know, so it's really something where, you know, you can be pretty aggressive with this shaft. Pretty poor swing from a result when I dragged it left. But I can't overpower this. I can't put too much into this shaft and feel like the shaft's getting away from me. This is giving me absolute stability through the ball. You know, so if I can put a better move on it, yeah, it's really tight at impact, really stable. I'm going to do one more for the data comparison where I'm not giving it a bit extra just to put a representative swing onto the others. But yeah, you know, if you're used to playing a more of a Project X style iron shaft, structurally a stiffer profile in your irons and want a similar feel in your hybrid, definitely a good one to go for. Right, let's check the numbers out. So we've gone over the feel characteristics of the shafts to hit with. But this is now the data side of it. So what in reality, the feel is a personal side and is open to personal interpretation. But data-wise, what can we see? Well, interesting enough, there is a definite progression from the profiles of the shaft that is affecting the flight. So what we can see here is efficiency-wise is the same head. In principle, a little bit less smash here out of the black, which, you know, maybe it could be strike because it's a human bit, but maybe it's just the fact that, you know, the shaft's giving me a little bit less back, possibly. But the noticeable thing here is the progression in launch angle. So we can see 14.8 on the red, 13.6 on the blue, 12.8 on the black. So getting roughly a degree of launch angle difference each progression on shaft. So what's affecting that? Well, the amount that that shaft is effectively as it comes through, it's hard to show on the black one, but it bends this way. So as it kicks through, you get a bit of rotation underneath, kick forward. So the softer the profile of the shaft, the more bend you get, and therefore the higher the launch. Or the stiffer the profile, the less bend you get, the lower the launch. And we're seeing that really quite clearly here. You know, with tolerances less than a degree on launch, we can see that there's an absolute progression in launch angle. But interestingly enough, when you pitch the spin relative to that, you know, 14.8, just over 4,000, 13.6, 3,944, 12.8, 3,873. The spin proportionately is staying really consistent. So it's more the launch angle change that is affecting the spin. It's not that the shaft profile is taking a massive amount off that. So the black isn't knuckling spin off from the red kicking spin up. You know, as you know, Fujikura state, you know, these are all fairly stable. They're not high spin shafts. It's your launch progression which is changing. So essentially what we're saying here is that this bit and this bit, the player and the club head, determine where that spin profile sits. The shaft is really controlling the pitch of launch angle. So that's really, particularly with this range of Ventus, that's what we're seeing. The shaft is affecting your initial launch angle, not necessarily the spin rate within the range relative to one another. So if you're going into a Ventus shaft, you're picking it for that initial launch, not because the shaft is massively affecting spin within the three shafts themselves. So actually it's really quite stark, and that's very definite from a launch angle point of view, but also very definite from a spin standpoint. So if you're picking between the Ventuses, pick it for flight and launch angle, not spin rate. So I hope that video on the Ventus range of hybrid shafts gives you something you can take away, you know, especially if you're looking at that range and what hybrid shaft is going to do what for you and why. So hopefully that can be useful for you. Also check out this video we did with Ian looking at 4-iron versus 7-wood, and again hopefully something you can take to the course, knowing what club might suit your game and why as well. So you know, as usual, please like, subscribe, and do let us know what you would like us to cover as well. You know, we're certainly happy to take any ideas on board and cover as much as possible that you'd like to see, because it's your content that we're doing it for. So hope you've enjoyed the video. See you again soon.